Hi everyone, my name is Bella Davila, and today I'm going to be talking about just some of the impacts that World War I had on America. As you guys know, for this discussion we were supposed to choose a group and then kind of talk about how that group evolved and changed over time as a result of World War I. And so for my group that I chose, I decided to choose soldiers. And so I'm just kind of going to be sharing a little bit of the notes that I have taken over this past week about what we learned about soldiers during World War I. So yeah, let's begin. To start off, I have here that one of the biggest changes was the type of warfare the soldiers experienced. So soldiers were spending long periods of time living in trenches, which we learned were these narrow ditches dug into the ground. And we learned that these trench conditions were extremely harsh. These soldiers dealt with mud, with rats, with lice, with like hard weather, limited food, and just like the constant smells and just constant death all around them. And diseases spread all around. There was trench foot spread because the soldiers' feet were like remaining wet for long periods of time. And these weren't these fast fighting, moving battles. Instead, soldiers sometimes stayed in the same location for weeks or for months. We also learned about new military technology being made, and because of this, it made combat more dangerous. So we learned about things like machine guns and poison gas and tanks and airplanes and all these different things that were causing injury and death to the soldiers on a much larger scale. So soldiers could be killed without ever even seeing the enemy. And so that's kind of some of the harsh realities that they had to face. This war also changed the idea of mental health. I was reading some articles about many soldiers experience what was called shell shock. And so because of just the horrible things that they had to go through, they suffered from nightmares and shaking and just confusion and lots of PTSD, and they had difficulty speaking and moving. And at first, like, the leaders believed it was because these soldiers were weak or cowardly, but over time people began to understand just like the immense psychological trauma that this was causing to the people. But another thing was that medical care for soldiers also improved during the war, and so doctors and nurses became more experienced in treating the severe wounds I was reading, and just like learning more about infections and burns and blood loss and just all these things. And so these improvements did save lives, and yeah, it did help in the medical sense. So anyways, we also learned about just the soldiers also having difficulty returning back home to normal life. Like I said, they had witnessed events that civilians had never experienced and could not fully understand, and so some really struggled to find jobs or reconnect with their families. And so yeah, overall World War I changed soldiers' lives immensely, but it didn't just change the soldiers' lives, it changed like the military training and the medical care, and even just like the mental health awareness in society's understanding of war. And so I just, it really did change my perspective and just gave me so much appreciation for all the soldiers who fought in this war and just sacrificed so much for us. So I hope you guys learned a lot. Thank you guys so much for listening. Bye.